In early spring of 49 BC, Julius Caesar faced a difficult decision. His rival Pompey had escaped to the east and was amassing a new army in Greece. To the west, 7 fully armed and trained Pompeian legions were absent, only their general to lead them. Given the immediate threat of the western legions, Caesar chose to march to Spain first, where he defeated Pompey's forces at the Battle of Ilerda. Caesar pardoned all those who had taken up arms against him, in the hopes that, given the chance to return to their homes and their lives, the men of Spain would not be encouraged to take up arms against him once more. But within 1 year of this victory, the whole of Spain would be up in arms once again, and a new civil war, this time between Caesarion and Caesarion, was on the verge of breaking out. So how could this have happened? What could Caesar have done to provoke such ire that not 1, but 2 rebellions would occur in the span of 4 years? This was Julius Caesar's greatest blunder. It's easy to imagine the Civil War as a kind of adventure game, where we follow Caesar around from place to place and read about his battles and conquests. When he leaves a region, we tend to assume that new governors were inserted and life went on without much of a fuss, but as we'll soon learn, that was not the case. The region of Hispania was home to 2 provinces, Hispania Citerior, or Nearer Spain, and Hispania Ulterior, or Farther Spain. After his victory at Ilerda, Caesar put Marcus Lepidus in charge of Nearer Spain. If that name sounds familiar to you, that's because this is the same Lepidus that will join Mark Antony and the future First Emperor Octavian in forming the Second Triumvirate after Caesar's assassination. In Further Spain, however, Caesar appointed a man named Quintus Cassius Longinus as propraetor of the region. The choice at first seemed logical. Cassius had served as quaestor of the very same region some years before, and his familiarity with the region, which happened to be the very same province that Caesar had held his propraetorship in 60 BC, made him an attractive choice. But it wasn't long before the cracks began to show, and the province that once held Caesar in the highest regard was filled with bitter resentment. Calling Cassius an unpopular man might be the greatest understatement ever made. Not long after his appointment, Cassius gathered his army with promises of paying each man a bonus of 100 sesterces each before heading out to sack Medibrega and Mount Herminius in Lusitania. After securing these easy victories, Cassius lavished enormous rewards onto individual soldiers for bravery to great cheer, all to give the impression of affection. Cassius, however, had his own financial troubles, and had vowed to impose severe tax burdens on his province, both to continue paying bonuses to his men to secure their loyalty, and to line his own pockets. However, it wasn't just the average resident who was made to suffer. Cassius ordered that the rich pay dues directly to his account. People of slender means were lumped in with the rich simply because Cassius didn't like them, and everyone who had anything to give was accused of crimes and forced to post bail in order to get the charges dropped. All this, including his enrollment of a brand new legion, the 5th, made him extremely hated in the province, and it wasn't long before a plot was hatched to rid Hispania Ulteria of Cassius for good. Later in the spring, Caesar sent a dispatch to Cassius, ordering him to bring his army across to Africa, to the kingdom of Numidia, where he was to engage King Juba, who had sent a large number of reinforcements to Pompey. The prospect of getting his hands on new provinces excited the propraetor, and he rushed to prepare for the crossing. The army mustered at Corduba, where Cassius relayed their orders before proceeding to a courthouse in the city proper. It was here that he was beset upon by a few of his officers, being stabbed twice, as well as receiving numerous other small wounds. Unfortunately for the would-be rebels, Cassius managed to survive this confrontation, and in his rage, he ordered anyone privy to the plot be executed unless they could buy themselves off. 2 of the conspirators, Calpurnius and Cestius, managed to save their own lives by paying the sum of 60,000 and 50,000 sesterces respectively to Cassius. In the book De Bello Civili, it is noted that in Cassius there was a struggle between cruelty and avarice. All this occurred around the time that Caesar was facing Pompey at Pharsalus, and when Cassius received news of Caesar's victory, and realized that the end of the war would put an end to his present position of power, he lost all restraint. If he was in debt to anyone, he summoned them to the court and ordered them to list him as a creditor instead for the same sums. He held yet another levy with men he knew would loathe to leave their homes, and when they had gathered, he ordered them to purchase their discharge from their military oath. These actions were the straw that broke the camel's back, and it wasn't long before the entire province of Hispania Ulterior was up in arms. Two figures in particular emerged to lead the rebellion: Titus Thorius of Italica and Marcus Marcellus, a quaestor. At one point, Thorius publicly declared his intent to retake the province for Pompey, and ordered the men to write Pompey's name on their shields. Seeing this, however, the townsfolk of Corduba came in a body to meet with the rebels and beg them with the words, "We are all with you in opposing Cassius, but please do not force us to act against Caesar." In this way, the army was touched by their pleas, and so they took Pompey's name off their shields and proclaimed Marcellus as their leader, and gave him the title of praetor. These events caused such fury in Cassius that he immediately sent dispatches to both King Bogus of Mauretania and Marcus Lepidus, the proconsul of Hispania Citerior, appealing for help, all while he took the troops that had remained loyal to him and ravaged the territory of Corduba and set fire to its towns as if they were barbarians. This shameful display outraged the legions that had chosen Marcellus as their leader, and they begged him to grant them the chance to give battle before the entirety of Corduba had been put to the sword. Marcellus was hesitant, since a battle would only do damage to the cause of Caesar himself, but he could not allow Cassius's rampage to go unchecked, so he led his troops out of the city and took up a position that forced Cassius to withdraw to a town called Iulia, which was situated on a high hill. Marcellus followed Cassius, and the two armies pitched camp near each other outside the town. But it wasn't until the arrival of King Bogus of Mauretania that Cassius decided to go on the offensive. Bolstered by his reinforcements, Cassius led several sorties against Marcellus and his forces, but despite suffering some losses, Marcellus remained firmly entrenched, and it was clear that as things stood, Cassius had no hope of dislodging his rival. While the battle was ongoing, Lepidus finally arrived from Hispania Citerior, followed by 3.5 legions. His intention was to settle the quarrel between Marcellus and Cassius, and upon his arrival, Marcellus immediately and voluntarily entrusted himself to Lepidus. Cassius, on the other hand, stayed within his defenses. Despite several invitations, Cassius remained within his fortifications, thinking that Lepidus had already been influenced by Marcellus. Lepidus forbade any additional fighting, and was nearing a peace settlement despite the uncooperative Cassius, when King Bogus launched a surprise attack on Marcellus's fort, causing severe losses. This surprise attack was only broken up by the timely arrival of Lepidus, who angrily put an end to the fighting. It was decided that Cassius would be replaced with Gaius Trebonius, and learning this, Cassius decided to make off with his misbegotten wealth. After settling his men into winter quarters, he boarded a ship with the intent of returning to Rome with his riches, but was caught in a storm at the mouth of the Ebro River and perished. It is difficult to overstate the amount of damage that Cassius managed to inflict on the name and reputation of Julius Caesar. For years, both as praetor and as consul, Caesar had campaigned against the exact kind of corruption that Cassius had engaged in. Not only this, but the Spanish, who had so recently counted their blessings for being left to continue their lives in peace by Caesar after the Battle of Ilerda, must have viewed the appointment and administration of Cassius as the pinnacle of hypocrisy. Not only did Cassius's management of Hispania Ulterior cause the revolt we just mentioned, but a few short years later, Titus Labienus, Caesar's former right-hand man and the last of the Pompeians, would make his way to Spain, where he managed to rally a huge number of men to his cause, as all of them had lived through the tyranny of a man appointed by Caesar himself.